In the shadow of Mount Rainier, where breathtaking beauty conceals an unforgiving nature, a gripping tale of survival unfolds. A daring climb, an unexpected turn of weather, and a desperate struggle for life. With every step, secrets buried beneath the ice unravel, pushing their courage to its limits. What follows is a harrowing series of events involving a life-saving crevasse, a tragic fall, and an audacious helicopter rescue mission. Brace yourself for a journey where resilience battles the elements and the mountain's icy heart reveals the true cost of survival. On June 19, 2012, a daring team from Waco, Texas embarked on a perilous Mount Rainier climb. Their goal was beyond just conquering Rainier. For them, Rainier was just a warm-up for the even more challenging Denali ascent, which is North America's tallest peak. The fearless group of 5 comprised Stacy Lytle, a Baylor University senior, Stuart Smith, a seasoned attorney with an impressive climbing history, Noelle Smith, his niece, and Ross Van Dyke, Baylor's assistant director of admission counseling. Van Dyke, having faced a weather-induced setback on a previous Rainier attempt, was back with a vengeance. And lastly, Claire McDonald completed the fearless crew. They opted for the Emmons Glacier route, an unmarked trail, and camped on the glacier above Sherman Flats after a relentless first day. Rising at 1:30 a.m., the next morning, they began their ascent at 2:30. The icy path, with inclines reaching 40 to 50 degrees, promised a challenging journey.
I remember sitting in camp the day before our big climb, staring at the summit and trying to imagine standing there. Everything was going smoothly, our team was getting along great. There were 4 of us ready for the summit push.
Claire recounted. Because she was feeling unwell, Claire had to turn back, and her teammates, Van Dyke and Stuart Smith, descended with her. After their return, the group continued toward the summit, displaying excellent teamwork. They successfully reached the top, celebrating with Snickers bars and photos. Excitement filled the air as they looked forward to a warm bowl of soup back at camp to mark their achievement. But little did they know, an unexpected weather front was approaching Mount Rainier, arriving 12 hours earlier than forecasted. As they descended, the temperature dropped sharply, turning the once soft snow into hard ice. The team had to find a new route to navigate a challenging crevasse due to the rapidly changing conditions. The freezing surroundings led them to a steep section with a 50-degree incline and a daunting drop of 3,000 feet. The suspense heightened as they faced this unexpected challenge on their way down. We were just 1,000 feet below the summit, doing a tricky traverse on the Emmons Glacier. Flagging wasn't allowed, and we had to navigate around the bergschrund. I was leading, and it seemed like we had about 100 yards to safety, Stuart recounted. With pickets strategically spaced for safety, they tackled the perilous climb. Stuart led the way, successfully completing the traverse. The team, aware of the risks, reached the safer part of the glacier. However, having used up all the pickets in the front, they faced a dilemma. Despite the danger, the group decided against placing another picket and instead opted for careful movement and gear retrieval.
Actually, I was terrified since I wasn't on the safe part of the glacier. It was steep, and being the youngest and a female, you never want to seem weak. Despite feeling scared and unsure, I didn't admit it. I just agreed to continue and said, "Yep, let's pull the picket,"
Lytle revealed. Meanwhile, team member Claire McDonald watched their descent from base camp through binoculars, adding an element of suspense. Stacy, Stuart, Ross, and Noelle secured their final piece of equipment and began descending. Stacy's crampon failed to grip the surface, and despite her efforts with the ice axe, they slid uncontrollably. Panic set in as she realized the loss of control. Ross vividly recalls the moment they were pulled off the mountain. In a desperate attempt to self-arrest, he felt like he was being ripped away. As they fell, thoughts of his wife raced through his mind, and he believed this might be the end. Without their knowledge, the treacherous bergschrund lurked just below, hidden from sight. As they plummeted, the grim realization struck they were facing their final moments. Stacy crashed violently against the opposite side of the crevasse, plunging everything into darkness as her head snapped back. Claire recounted,
I instantly grasped the severity of the situation as they descended rapidly. The abrupt halt was bewildering. I couldn't fathom how they had come to a stop.
20 minutes later, Stacy slowly woke up in the snow, lying on her back. As she got her bearings, she saw she was alive, held in place by her harness. Stuart Smith lay next to her, tangled in the rope. Glancing down, she saw a companion hanging about 60 feet below. The third team member's whereabouts were unknown. 2 ends of the rope led uphill, prompting Stacy to climb without an ice axe. With determination, she clawed her way up the icy slope, reaching the edge of a crevasse. Noelle Smith was inside, partially stopping their fall and saving lives. However, Noelle was distressed, her harness slipping. Knowing Noelle was crucial for the team's safety, Stacy felt a sense of urgency. The climbers were vulnerable, and Stacy had to quickly devise a plan for their escape. Meanwhile, climber Peter Ramos, part of a different group, had just conquered Mount Rainier. As we reached the summit of Liberty Ridge, my friend and I were eager for a break. Looking towards the Emmons Glacier, I noticed bodies lying with a knee raised, an unusual resting position. As we approached, it became clear it wasn't rest at all. Peter recounted. Claire McDonald, watching through binoculars at the ranger station, was horrified.
I quickly alerted the 2 rangers with me and handed them the binoculars. Uncertain at first, I insisted, "No, they fell.
Despite the initial hesitation, they eventually began their incredible response, making radio calls and taking action. After waking up, Ross Van Dyke was disoriented, trying to understand his surroundings. Distant voices reached him, and his senses were like a scene from a movie after an explosion. Initial silence, followed by a ringing sensation, gradually clearing. Wondering where he was, he surveyed the area, finding no one nearby. Suddenly, a familiar voice, Stacy's, called out. Looking up, he saw her and heard urgent words.
"You have to come up here. I can't explain, but you have to come to me."
Despite a dislocated pelvis, Van Dyke dragged himself up the mountain. Uncertain of what had happened, he believed he might have broken his femur, fueled by adrenaline. Ignoring the lack of pain, he used his one good leg, a crampon, and an ice axe to climb almost 100 feet to reach Stacy. Van Dyke pressed on as he passed Stewart, who he thought was dead. At the ranger station, U.S. Army Reserve Chinook pilot David Bolger received a call about stranded climbers in a worsening weather situation. Unaware of the severity initially, as he gathered information, he realized the mission would be extremely challenging, making him nervous. The rescue crew, consisting of 2 pilots, a flight engineer, a crew chief, National Park Service members, and 2 paramedics from Madigan Army Hospital, prepared thoroughly for the mission. Despite detailed planning, the exact condition of the stranded climbers remained uncertain until they reached the rescue site. Peter Ramos rushed to the fall site, a 45-minute journey with his climbing partner. As a seasoned mountain guide and expedition nurse, he sprang into action. Ross, still in shock, muttered, "Holy sh!" At the scene, Ramos and his team found 4 individuals, Noelle trapped in a crevasse, 2 on a snow bridge above him, and Stuart Smith lying 25 feet away. I asked for a show of hands. 3 raised theirs, but not the person in the crevasse. She had a major head injury, couldn't state her name or location. When asked about the fall, she had no memory. I knew she was critical. We had to get her out, Peter explained. Noelle, despite being in the crevasse, was their lifeline.
"It's a miracle she fell there."
Liedel marveled. As Peter set up an anchor, rangers from base camp quickly ascended to join him. Claire McDonald, watching from below, marveled at their speed. The rangers assessed the situation, set up another anchor, and rescued the climbers. Stacy explained.
"Once they arrived, we stabilized everything."
Peter, deferring to the rangers, said, "This is your rescue and your mountain. Tell me where you need me." They requested medical help, and Peter began evaluating injuries. One climber had a broken leg, arm, and back. Another had a collapsed lung and 2 broken legs. The third had a dislocated hip, a brain bleed, and a suspected broken back. Upon reaching the scene, David Bolger's team found injured climbers on the glacier. They prioritized the most severe cases, successfully hoisting Noelle Smith without complications during the initial rescue. After Ramos safely loaded the climber onto the sled, the Chinook helicopter lifted her away to safety. Meanwhile, they geared up to help the next injured person, Stuart Smith. The winds were fierce, and a sudden storm hit. Stuart mentioned feeling warm, a sign of severe hypothermia requiring urgent action. Despite the worsening conditions, Bolger stressed the need to press on with the rescue operation amidst the approaching snowstorm, realizing time was running out to save as many people as possible. On that day, 3 pilots, 2 in the cockpit and 1 monitoring the cliff base, led the mission. The crew included a chief operating the winch and a flight engineer. Alongside them were 2 paramedics from a nearby Army hospital and 2 elite rescue climbers from the National Park Service, renowned for their extensive training in various fields. Notably, Nick Hall was among these skilled climbers. As the crew descended, the flight engineer signaled the hoist distance, confirming ground contact. The rescue climber swiftly unhooked the cable, and with a nod from Nick Hall, the team prepared to reel in the cable. Then, out of nowhere, Bolger exclaimed, "Oh God," he felt Peter, secured to the hillside, felt a sudden impact that nudged him downward. Relying on his anchor, he halted the slide down the icy slope. Glancing back, he saw a figure hurtling down at high speed. Recognizing the seriousness, Peter turned away, unable to witness the rest. "I couldn't bear to watch," he admitted. Stacy Lytle remembered the chaos that ensued. Radios were ablaze with frantic shouts. Amidst the commotion, there was a sudden silence. At the time, the full extent wasn't clear, but something had gone wrong. A voice on the radio pleaded, "Can someone check if he's still with us?" Bolger skillfully maneuvered the helicopter down the mountain, closely following Hall's descent. Descending to around 8,000 feet, he executed a turn to reverse course, zigzagging up the gully in search of the climber. Spotting Hall near a cliff, he hovered directly above, about 100 feet in the air, watching for any signs of movement. Realizing he needed to drop someone down, Bolger struggled to find a suitable spot in the rugged terrain. After backtracking a quarter-mile down the gully, a rescue climber leaped from the helicopter and began the journey back to Nick's location. However, fuel levels were dangerously low. The helicopter returned to its pad, and shortly after, the coordinator received news that Nick Hall had passed away. Bolger described the moment as surreal, with everyone in shock. Despite the tragedy, the team remained committed to the mission. They regrouped and continued with 3 injured people on the mountain. With the approaching sunset, Bolger noted the time constraints but believed they could still succeed. As they descended, the wind calmed just in time for the sunset, their last source of light. Despite doubts about the storm, they heard the Chinook again, signaling a final attempt to rescue the remaining injured party during this brief window of calm weather. The next 2 climbers breezed through the mission, no problems in just a few minutes each. It felt like the wind took a break for us. Perfect. David remembered. Ross, in intense pain, got onto the sled, and Stacy, the least injured, was set to be the last airlifted. A fierce storm hit with strong winds from above, making the helicopter operation challenging. Hovering over a vast expanse of white ice and snow, David faced a tough situation like balancing on the tip of a pen in high winds. The pilots had to take turns hovering, a physically demanding task. David, with his extensive career, never faced such challenging hovering conditions before on Mount Rainier. They stashed me on a shelf, like bunk beds, but with litters. All I could think was, don't hit the mountain? The cliff loomed just 20 feet from the Chinook's rotor on the right. The pilot, in a suspenseful hover, lowered the rescue seat as the sun dipped, shifting the light dramatically. David's team swiftly secured the person in need, but then the pilot shouted, "I've lost all visual references. You take control." With the fading sun turning everything gray, David took charge, using a lone footprint in the snow as his guide. He held the hover for 20 intense seconds, enough for the rescue climber to secure Stacy. Suddenly, the footprint vanished. The helicopter wobbled wildly. On the ground, the rescuer saw the chaos, tackled Stacy, and unclipped her from the seat. The flight engineer signals the climbers are clear, urging a swift departure. Bolger remembers, the helicopter just took off. It was me, a couple of climbing rangers, and we realized we're stuck here for the night. Despite a deep concern for the uninjured evacuee, the team knew she needed safety after her mountain ordeal. Uneasy but determined, they recognized no other viable options. Upon landing, David, drawing on his 10 years of flying, admitted, "This was the most scared I've ever been." The seasoned pilot, with 30 years in the air, agreed, "That was the most scared I've ever been." Lytle, exposed since 2 a.m., faced extreme cold after a near-death experience. Through the night, the climbing rangers shared hope, expecting the helicopter's return in the morning, fostering eager anticipation.
The next morning, we woke up to a blinding whiteout outside our tent. Couldn't tell which way was down. Suddenly, they handed me an ice axe, and I realized the challenge wasn't over, it was time to go. I didn't know if I had it in me,
Stacy recalled. Meanwhile, on his day off, David spoke with 2 pilots heading back to the mountain the next day. They climbed as high as they could, aiming to find a gap in the clouds for a descent, but it was a futile effort. The mountain stayed hidden in clouds for 10 to 12 days. Stacy and the rangers started their steep descent with limited visibility, haunted by the previous day's ordeal. Facing a massive crevasse, frustration peaked. Stacy hit her limit, even contemplating giving up. In a vulnerable moment, she asked a ranger to leave her there. But he encouraged her, emphasizing this was the moment that mattered. Stacy found the strength to keep going, and by day's end, she successfully descended Mount Rainier. The nightmare was finally over. Surprisingly, as Stacy opened the front door, news cameras captured the incredible moment. She was quickly taken to a nearby house where her parents awaited, overwhelmed with emotion. Tears flowed as they were reunited, and gratitude filled the air. Stacy, reflecting on her survival, pondered how to move forward from the harrowing experience. Meanwhile, Ross Van Dyke, taken to Madigan Army Base, discovered the extent of his injuries. A dislocated hip, a pulmonary embolism, and a blood clot with a piece reaching his lungs. The prognosis was a year before he could walk again. Recalling the moment, Ross became emotional, expressing indifference to his own condition. However, his mood shifted when he learned a rescuer had lost their life during the mission. Saddened, he couldn't believe the impact of their ordeal on an innocent person trying to help. Despite the injuries, Stacy, Stewart, Noel, and Ross all made full recoveries. The events on Mount Rainier that day left a lasting impact on everyone involved. Stacy admitted that the emotional weight of the incident didn't fully hit her until days later. Attending the memorial service, she realized the rich life led by the person who lost their life. David Bolger, expressing condolences, emphasized the dedication of the rescuer who will be forever missed. Thanks to the brave Rangers and the Army helicopter team, Stacy and the other climbers safely reached base camp during tough times. Stacy expressed deep gratitude, acknowledging the heroic efforts that saved them. Thanks for joining us till the end. If you liked this video recounting the tale of the Mount Rainier disaster, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for more upcoming videos.